I just want to use this to give you the opportunity to share to other people who might be considering this, how it came to be, how you and I came to be, how Newton came to be, why Newton, and kind of how he's been for you since January of 26 or February when you actually met him, of 21. And it's now August the 22nd of 2023.
Yeah.
So a few buckets of water have washed under the bridge, right? So let me just hand it over to you and share away what you can, bring up. You were so eloquent the other day when we talked. You were. Don't sell yourself short.
I tried.
I wanted to give you the opportunity to say it to a wider audience than me.
Yes, so on Friday, I'm moving to Auckland, New Zealand for a year to be a high school rowing coach after spending past 8 years of my life or so rowing. And I definitely would not have been able to take this step if it wasn't for how much Newton has done for me the past 2 years.
Okay.
So I mentioned to you the other day that I used to love traveling when I was a kid, and I always pictured myself going all over the world, especially when I was in my 20s. But then as time went on and I started dealing with a lot of mental illness, I sort of lost that drive and that interest in doing a lot of that. And so when this opportunity came up, I realized how much better I was doing because I was so excited about the possibility of living across the world for an entire year.
And without your
And without Newton, because he can't come with me because of the quarantine rules. But I never would have felt this prepared to do this 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, even last year. I don't think I would have been quite ready to do it. I think it definitely was something that, having spent so much time with Newton, especially having him at school where it's just been the two of us. I always had roommates, but just the two of us without my family and a lot of my larger support system. It became very clear that Newton himself was just helping me grow and helping me be more comfortable and more adventurous and more open and willing to do things.
All right, so you got the opportunity to select Newton. He went through some puppy raising. Tell me if you can share what it was like when you were first adjusting to the presence of Newton and what your first noticeable change was in your whole mood after he came to you.
So the first night I did cry. I was very overwhelmed. I was excited and I knew that this was the right thing for me, but it kind of all hit me at once. It was a big flood of emotions and I did end up crying, but Newton just cuddled up with me on my bed as I cried. And
what were the tears about?
I don't know. I was just really overwhelmed and I was like, I have a life that I'm in charge of other than my own now. And I've had a history of not taking care of myself very well. And now it's suddenly here's a whole other creature that's I'm responsible for. And so
it wasn't a cry of regret. It was just a feeling of just being overwhelmed by the enormity of this new step.
But the rest of the 3-day sleepover, I found I was just laughing a lot. He was a very silly puppy. He would run around, put his head down on the ground and flip over onto his back. He would do somersaults. He would roll around on the couch and just generally was incredibly silly. Newton.
And did he like to hear you laugh?
Yeah. He would occasionally cock his head at me like the first time I started really laughing. I think he was kind of like, what am I doing? But it definitely, I felt a lot more cheerful and upbeat. So I remember when I had to bring him back, I said to you, how early can I pick him up tomorrow morning? I was like, the first night was overwhelming, but then the next couple days, I was like, I need to have him in my life.
All right, so you mentioned that you found the first few days overwhelming, but when you had to bring him back, because that's mandatory, and I say that you can let him stay for as long as you need until you're ready to get him back, you can get him back the next day, and
I don't even like getting up early, but I said, how early can I pick him up? And I think I came here at like 8 in the morning. I went right back to sleep afterwards. But I was like, I have to have Newton on my bed.
And what were the first couple of weeks like with him once he was actually placed with you?
So it was a lot of working on the training and things that you had brought up and the things that Chris and Gwen had told me about, some of his behaviors.
Those are the puppy raisers, Chris and Gwen.
Yeah. And so it was a lot of just adjusting to that, practicing things like getting eye contact. We'd play a lot of games of touch, and then I'd make him stay, and then I'd walk away really far and then make him touch again. We did a lot of that in the backyard. But he generally just kind of started coming with me everywhere. Anytime I needed to run an errand, he'd just be with me. Every time I was hanging out in my room, he would just be hanging out with me. And it was just a very comforting presence, and I felt my mood steadily increase the entire first couple weeks I had him. And then he helped it remain very constant. Even at times that I would be really anxious or really struggling, he'd kind of help ground me and bring me back down.
So you had him in school. Now I want to go back just one step, because one of the things that I do with the training is we do all these public access outings.
Mm-hmm.
And you remember when we went to Target?
Yes.
And the floor?
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk a little bit about that, because I'm guessing that once you learned about that awareness between the different kinds of floors,
Mm-hmm.
that it made it make more sense when you were out without me to understand why he could or couldn't do something.
Yeah.
And the degree to which your own energy impacted his ability to do or to not. And what was the line I always say to people when you're not feeling confident you can do it? What do I say? Do you remember?
Breathing.
Fake it till you make
Fake
it.
it till you make it.
Fake
That's
it
what
till
I
you
always
make
say
it.
in rowing.
Fake it till you make it, you know, because you're doing this for him. You're not doing it for yourself, but
Mhm.
you really are, but you do it through him. And before long, you're getting him to generalize and do the behavior. So share with me what you remember of that experience when we were at Target with him.
So I remember being very stressed because this was our first real public access outing. And I had a lot of thoughts of, well, he's not doing what I'm telling him to do. And how is this even going to work if he's not listening to me and not responding? And it was really I was really ramping myself up. And then you told me, you were like, just sit here for a second and take some deep breaths. And as soon as I started breathing deeply and relaxing myself, that's when Newton finally laid down and listened.
You know what my t-shirt and hoodie for sale say, right?
I breathe in, I breathe out, my dog lays down.
Yep.
Yeah. And so he did that, and I went, oh. So if I'm getting too ramped up, Newton's just going to be all over the place.
So, you're leaving in a few days to go away for a year. You're feeling really calm and not anxious about it, which is really incredible. I would be anxious if I were going to New Zealand for a year, but I'm really impressed. And so it's sort of like the dog's role for you from when you first got him to now has obviously changed, since you feel pretty confident and comfortable about going
Mm-hmm.
to New Zealand to be a rowing coach in a girls' high school. So just briefly, can you share how you got to this place from when you first got him and you were just overcome with emotion?
So when I first got him, I was bringing him absolutely everywhere that I could. I started off just with some dog-friendly places until we did more public access outings. And then I began bringing him everywhere with me, to restaurants, any form of store, even just short little trips to run into a CVS or a Target. And he was just constantly by my side like glue. And that was really, really great for me for a long time. And then I started feeling a little less socially anxious and a little more confident and a little more able to do things. So I started test running some short outings of me without Newton to see how that would go and how that transition would be, and whether or not I was just feeling more confident because he was there,
Okay.
or if I became more confident just over time having him and being able to check off things that had stressed me out. And now that I've done it with Newton, can I do it on my own?
Right.
So I started making those quick trips, and eventually I was building it up to going to restaurants, which were famously incredibly stressful for me since childhood.
Tell me a little, let's do a deep briefing about that, because that too is interesting.
Yeah, so when I was always a really picky eater when I was young, and if I went to a restaurant and I didn't immediately see something on the menu that I thought I'd want to eat, I'd get so stressed. I usually would cry, and then my whole family would be at dinner and I'd just be sobbing at this table. And I'd get really overwhelmed if it was a loud restaurant, if it was very noisy and there was a lot happening, that really exacerbated those feelings. And so for a while, I basically tried to avoid restaurants altogether. I'd have to drive separate, so I had the opportunity to leave early if I needed to leave early.
But that wasn't until you were 16.
Yeah,
Okay.
around that time.
Okay.
And so Then I brought Newton with me to a bunch of restaurants, and he really helped calm me down. Would hit his nose into my leg if I started breathing too shallow or my heart rate got too fast. And I would take deep breaths, and then he'd relax and I'd relax. And so then I started trying to go to restaurants without him, just for short things, like just going in quickly for lunch, and then getting up to much longer dinners. And now I don't find restaurants overwhelming anymore. Like, I can go with my family to a restaurant that's really busy and quite noisy. And although it's a little annoying when a restaurant's really noisy, I don't panic anymore. I don't have the urge to cry or get in my car and leave.
And do you understand why that happened? Like what actually happened in your brain?
I think it was being there with Newton. I knew he was there to comfort me and help me get through it. And then the more times I went to restaurants with him, I realized that the more times we were there, the less he'd have to alert me. But it was nice knowing he was there as like a safety net for me. And so then over time, I realized that, oh, this actually isn't that bad. I can get through a dinner without freaking out or having to leave. I don't have to cry at the table. And so then after starting to feel a lot more comfortable having him there, I was like, well, I wonder if this transfers over to when he isn't there. If I still have managed to get over that sort of bump in the road.
And for the record, this happened after our 6-month agreement. And while we saw each other occasionally, you did this on your own. And again, kudos, because that shows a real growth in your own judgment.
Yeah.
And you know that you could have gotten in touch if you had any questions. Okay.
So yeah, now I've started to try doing a lot of things without Newton, especially this summer, to try and prepare me for going off, because I'm not going to be with him. So we still have plenty of time together during the day. We still go on walks and we still play. But it's also an opportunity now that I'm like, I can do all these things and I can go out and see friends, or I can even go, I've gone away for the weekend this summer without him. And last summer I went to France for a week. And it was like sort of building up these moments where I realized that he helped me so much in my growth to feeling better, that now I don't need him with me all the time and I still feel better.
Right.
And I even went down on my antidepressant.
Wow.
50%.
How long ago was that?
That was, I want to say 2-3 months ago.
Wow. And that's what I mean about your brain, like the opportunity to make new neural pathways of being able to do these things that you couldn't do before because you just get overstimulated and reactive.
Yeah.
And your dog helped you.
He did. 100%.
And yet they're over there just being dogs, being reactive. And, you know, that's the magic of it. It's like they're just dogs.
Yeah.
But they're amazing dogs. Like, just dogs. What does that mean? It's just a dog. It is just a dog. And it's a dog that does all these magnificent things. And I'm especially, you know, love staying in touch with you because you have one of Pinto's siblings from the fruit litter, the mostly fruit litter. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we end our little discussion? Hi.
Nothing immediately comes to mind. Just that, yeah, I couldn't have imagined 2 years ago before getting Newton, when I was in one of the darkest points of my life. I couldn't imagine that 2 years later I would be happily choosing to go live across the world for a year, away from basically all aspects of my support system, except obviously through phone and text.
Right.
But I never would have imagined that only 2 years later I would be feeling so excited and so ready to do this.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and talk about it and commit it to a recording, and I wish you only good things.
Hi, I'm 3 months into my New Zealand adventure without Newton, and I will be heading home soon for 2 weeks over the holidays. Overall, this experience has been absolutely incredible, and I didn't think 2 years ago I'd ever be able to do something like this, but here I am, really, really enjoying it. And I'm so thankful to Newton and everything he's done for me, making it so I'm able to do this, live on the other side of the world for a year and experience all these new things. I'm also really thankful for Rachel for helping raise Newton and connecting us and helping me have this experience as well.